Welcome to Uncover the Human, where every conversation revolves around enhancing all the connections in our lives.
Whether that's with our families, co-workers, or even ourselves.
When we can be our authentic selves, magic happens. This is Alex Cullimore.
And this is Christina Amigoni.
Let's dive in.
Hello, Christina.
Hello, it's Friday again.
It's Friday. Yes, I mean, it's not for the people who are listening to this right away. It's Wednesday for you, but for us, it's Friday, and it's the end of the day Friday, and it's the end of a somewhat brain flattening week kind of Friday.
Yes, as in back to back to back to back to back to back, never ending. Yes.
But one of those many back-to-backs was the conversation we just had with Adrienne Graves, which was a great conversation. She shared so much just personal journey. What a story. What an incredible, like, I don't even know. I would say life journey is really the only way I can describe it. It's to do it justice.
Yeah, incredible. Every time I talk to her and she shares more about it, it's so amazing and just inspiring that she can share her journey, all the things that happened to her, which are more than any one person can happen in a life, you can handle in a lifetime. And the courage to keep sharing it, to just live in her, in what she learned in her reality, and not shy away, I guess, and hide because of all of it. It's very inspiring.
Great story of finding courage in the middle of just lots of tragedy and finding ways to show up, be present, be intentional, and how she's brought that both to her life and to the people around her. It's she comes across very easily as just having that presence, and I hope that comes just as easily into the recording because it's a powerful story.
Yes, very powerful, and just to her view of what we can do with the time we have until, well, the inevitable ending.
Yes, this one is the episode where we started talking about death. So
Yes.
I'm sure we mentioned that at some point, but we got more into that.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah, for sure. Yes. So hope you enjoy.
Yeah. Welcome back to this episode of Uncover the Human. Today we are joined with our guest, Adrienne Graves. Welcome to the podcast, Adrienne.
Thanks for having me, you guys.
Hi, Adrienne.
Hi, Christina. Hi, Alex. Good to be here.
It's great to have you on. So if you wouldn't mind giving just a little background for our audience, what brought you here? Who is Adrienne?
Who is Adrienne? Well, I'm a writer. I'm an author recently. I got to work on a collaborative book called Moms Never Stop Worrying, and the subtitle, and being brave at the same time. So it's essays about having grown or out of the nest kids, sharing our own stories of being brave in the midst of, not knowing what we're doing, winging it as parents. So that was really fun to be part of. And then I've written a blog at adriennegraves.com for over 18 years. And that was actually inspired. My writing was re-inspired by a son of ours, our middle child, Noah, who passed away. And while he was in the hospital, a friend set up a blog for me. I didn't know what a blog was at the time because this was 18 years ago. I thought I was just talking to my mom and dad in Arizona and my mother-in-law in South Dakota, but his blog actually went viral around the world. Even some scientists at the South Pole were sending prayers and good thoughts for his healing. But he never got a diagnosis. But during that 5-month stint at the hospital, I started writing, and I am a theologian by training, Christian theologian by training, and I was a women's minister for several years, a couple different churches, and his life and death basically forced me to ask bigger questions than I had been, I guess, just conditioned or trained in. So now I write about kind of the collision of culture and faith, and when things don't go the way we plan. And I didn't set out, like when I was a kid, I wasn't like, oh, someday I want to talk about grief all the time. Like that just wasn't my aspiration. But now I coach folks through grief and also existential questions, like asking the big questions that don't feel safe sometimes in traditional faith settings. Yeah. That's kind of a elevator pitch, if that was short enough.
Oh, there's no time limit, but that's a great intro. I love the that's it's a very intensive story, and it does kind of show the idea of a how much life changes underneath our own feet, but also the story of kind of connecting. You reach out, you write something that feels very private, but it's very just raw and realistic, and there's a lot of people that can connect with that. And I don't know, sometimes it reminds me that there's a lot where we have that is just generally unspoken as people, and sometimes it's deeply cathartic to come across that, and it can be spread very quickly.
Well, that's what I found in at first I was just saying like, hey, we have this appointment or we have this. And then finally, because of my upbringing and conditioning, I thought I just had to be a good Christian girl and not ever say anything wrong or negative. And then I was like, do we have expletives on this podcast?
Yeah, you can say
because my true real prayer was finally, are you fucking kidding me, Lord? Are you fucking kidding me? My kid is sick and dying in a hospital and you're not healing him.
Yeah.
And I still hadn't put that out on the blog. That was my like vertical prayer. And I sat in the hallway in the hospital that night and thought I was going to get struck by lightning. I honestly thought I'd be a pile of ash because I had said the F word to the creator of the universe. And the ironic thing was that, that didn't happen. Here we are. I'm on your podcast.
Yeah.
But I also had a sense of peace. I'm kind of a smart ass, and I was just like, oh, you're okay with this. You already knew that I was totally disenchanted with the way you're running the universe. And I think this is total crap. And I don't approve. But I'm going to love this kid and I'm going to love the one I have at home. We have a daughter who was 4.5 when Noah passed away. And I just, in that moment, I felt so seen. It was like the books in the Bible that are actual, like, people crying out to God. It's not just the polished stuff you hear in sermons. It was the laments. And I was, I guess, testing them out, not on purpose, just in like necessity. And in that moment, I came back to the blog and I said, where, and this is my smart assness, because like the Bible was my textbook in college, you know what I mean? So it wasn't like I didn't know. But I said, where does it say that God will give us he'll never give us more than we can handle because I can't handle this. And then that's when people came out of the woodwork from all over the world, many of them trying to quote the scriptural reference to me. And I'm like, you're quoting it out of context. Bless you. Hashtag blessed. I was just like, well, I don't know. Back then, 18 years ago, that was still pre-hashtag. But I was like, no, that's actually false. That's just modern American Christian language to try to satisfy like things we don't understand. And what I had to, right? I was forced. I was in an impossible situation. I couldn't fix my son. The college I went to, it said expect a miracle on the side of the basketball court. Like I expect miracles. Plus I was a theology major. So like extra special, believed it all. And the truth is like, I had to face my biggest fear, which was death. I was like 35 at the time. I had feared death since I was a little kid and avoided the topic, as most Americans try to do. Yeah, we want to avoid it or just make it, get over it quick. Move on, get over it. And I couldn't. I was like in the thick of it. And I realized, so our son never got a diagnosis. And in Western medicine, without a diagnosis, there is no treatment. So he was on some palliative measures as far as life support, which my husband and I decided to remove Noah from life support after 5 months of no one knowing anything, and also his body just shutting down. But okay, I'm pausing. You might need to edit this because I'm like, what was I saying? Okay.
Expecting a miracle. You mentioned that.
Yeah, sorry about that, guys. I'm just like,
No,
no apologies.
No apologies needed.
So I expected a miracle, but my theology and my reality weren't lining up.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
And, a lot of people were afraid about that, pushing back, asking the questions. And I've never thrown away all of it. Like God and I have always been fine.
Mm-hmm.
It's that as a theologian, I thought I was going to study to figure out, belief and figure out God, and then be able to, relay that to everybody else. And the truth is the longer and the more that I've dug into trying to figure out God, the more, and belief and existence and all of that, the more I don't know, and actually the more peace I have as a result. And Noah was a pivotal person for me. I mean, the kid, just like this wise sage who never said a word. He was 7 months old when my husband and I removed him from life support. And I remember we didn't want to put him on life support because we didn't want to take him off, because it's a bullshit position for a parent to be in. Yeah. It's like, are you fucking kidding me, Lord? But it was that prayer where I felt the most at peace. And the name Noah means peace, actually. And actually in Hebrew, peace is shalom. And the word shalom, when you define it, is nothing is missing, nothing is broken. And so for me, it's like overcoming my perception of death, my perception of life, what is existence, like all the things, right? And I, my lingo, my terminology at the time was like, bless God, I'm okay with this. But the truth is I'm not. I'm okay that we went through this experience. Because our eyes and our hearts were changed radically. I mean, my husband went from having a PhD in engineering to shifting into the nonprofit world and doing world relief work. It was like, snap on the, I don't know, turn of a dime of, okay, I am going to pay attention. I'm going to be engaged. I want to be present, exactly where I am, because I didn't know how long, Noah had when he was in the hospital. I was all about having him be healed, and then we'd travel around the world and we'd tell everybody how good God was, because my expectation was that the outcome would be his total healing, right? And then that didn't happen. And what I realized is the American Christian system specifically, because that's where I was trained, but also I've traveled all over the world and I've met people who believe and love and follow God in all forms on all continents. Well, I didn't South America, the South Pole, Antarctica. But anyway, I've been to 5 continents, and we don't have a corner in the market on how to know God,
Mhm.
how to live as human beings on this earth.
Mhm.
We are all uh, we're all humans sharing space on earth. We're the ones who have created the delineations and the silos and the separations. And that was what it was. Noah was never given a diagnosis. And so I would have been the person who, had he been given a diagnosis, I would have started a foundation. I would
Mhm.
have been raising millions of dollars to figure out the cure. So nobody else would have had that thing. Right.
Mhm.
And I think that's awesome. I love that moms and parents, I mean, any organization that is helping raise
Yeah.
funding
Yeah.
for cures, that's exactly what has happened. Somebody has been affected, right?
Yes.
But being a theologian and a chronic empath, what I realized is our experience was that this is the human condition, right? So there's 100% chance we're all going to die.
Yeah.
Like nobody's getting out of here alive, right?
Yeah.
Um, and even and it's the thing that I feared the most. But what I was, all the energy and all of the time and all of the effort I was spending fearing death and trying to avoid the
Mhm.
topic and trying to, yeah, avoid it, right? Like it's all up in my business. This is like my kid. I can't do anything about it. And I was like, 100% chance we're all going to die, but what percent chance am I living? What percent chance are we going to
Mhm.
live
Yeah.
fully with the time we have, whatever it is, right? Because we all want like 96 and in our sleep, like,
Yeah.
and pain free, whatever. That's great, but it doesn't happen all the time. So, what percent chance, though, am I going to live fully with intention, in
Mhm.
awe, with curiosity and wonder now?
Yeah.
And so that's what I started doing. Like when my daughter would come to the hospital, I would, sit on the floor. We'd do art. We'd go explore. We'd go hide under tablecloths and have deep
Mhm.
conversations about castles in the sky
Mhm.
and death and life. And then when I knew, there was a point when Noah was in the hospital where I was like fighting, fighting, fighting. Like there's going to be no stone unturned, right? Like you figured this out. Um, I mean, mice died at the CDC from his stool. Nobody knows why.
Mhm.
Um, Scientists in Australia were trying to figure out, in South America, trying to figure out like what's wrong, what's going on with his body, because every test kept coming back negative, negative, inconclusive, whatever. And when then one day, one of the doctors handed me a stack of 17 different leukodystrophies, which is the white matter of the brain.
Hmm.
And I was like, no, that's your job. You figure that out. My job is to love the heck out of this human, to soak in this human. And so it was funny. I had been standing like a flamingo, with one leg up in his crib and then the other obviously holding me up on the floor and just trying to spoon him like awkwardly. And this one nurse came in, he was like 6'5", and he goes, I do believe engineers created those cribs to fit parents too. And that was all I needed. I mean, I jumped right up in there and
Mhm.
I memorized Noah like it was my job.
There's a huge theme of kind of this acceptance of unknowability in all of the stories in truly terrifying circumstances. But you've studied theology, wanting to know, wanting to be able to spread it. You end up with not even a diagnosis. There's a lot of just incredibly challenging unknown
Uh-huh.
in all of the story, and that's, I think, probably one of the scarier parts of death for most people tends to be that idea of what is unknown about it, and what that knowing that it is, while not knowing what it is.
Mhm.
And that's you've had a front row view of that for a long time, and I really love your challenge of, hey, what if instead of knowing that there's a 100% chance of death, but there is still a totally variable percent chance of how much you're living.
Mhm.
That's a powerful reframe of, well, you know where this goes, but what do you do in the meantime?
Mhm.
And then that you have some say over or some decision in.
Right. Yeah, I mean, that's I had to decide like how I was going to show up. And I mean, I haven't done it perfectly. There have been plenty of days where I've rocked myself in my closet in the corner crying, or, just played Scrabble all day on my phone, right? As one does, as word nerds do, muggles who have to use words. But
Yes.
I love that I appreciate you sharing that, Alex, and being able to pull that out, because that has been my biggest, I guess, battle or struggle, is making peace um, with the unknowns, but also, so as word nerds, I like to look words up in the dictionary that I already know the definition for, because we can learn new things. And I've had this gut feeling as a theologian, as a minister, as a Christian person in America, a Christ follower, is whatever. I don't like to brand it and label it, because holy cow, has it gotten hijacked. But I have had this like nauseating frustration with the fear-based, fear-driven theology that has become the American Christian church. And you hit the nail on the head with that. Like we want certainty. And so that, I mean, I was gung ho certainty. I'm going to figure God out. And if I just read this and I study this and I do this and I say this prayer this way, and then, it'll all be figured out. I can just replicate it by going into all the world and sharing it this way. And that doesn't work with 8 billion genetic expressions of humans on the earth. Like, we're 8 billion different reflections of a really creative, bigger entity than we are, right? If we're made in the image of God, like, we're just a reflection. We're a glimpse. And that whole desire for certainty and an answer, and I'm going to just show you this 3-point sermon or these scriptural references or whatever, it just grieves me, because it boxes in existence. Like, it's silly. We're silly. I'm silly, and I realize how silly it is that I was so like hell-bent on trying to figure it out. And so when you look at the word agnostic, it's like so beautiful, because it says, I believe there's something bigger than me, but I'm not about to try to figure that out or try to explain it to you. And I think if we can get back to, as humans, and especially I'm talking directly to the American Christian Church right now, because America as a whole has been affected, whether you were raised in it or not, somehow by the American Christian Church. Okay. If we can get back to curiosity and wonder and awe and mystery, like, if you took all the major world religions and you took their theologians and had a conference, they'd all just sit and try to convince one another of why you need to think and believe and exactly like them, whatever camp it is. They're all going to do the same thing. But if you put all of the major world religions' mystics in a room, they'd be there for the rest of eternity, just being like, oh my gosh, how awesome is God? And the awe and the wonder, and not just God, but like humanity, existence, creation, like the ocean, all of it. And I know I'm getting like way out there, but
it all makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, in order to get it just into the day to day of like, And I think, honestly, that's why there's a golden rule in every single religion, and why Jesus emphasized it when he was pressed with like, okay, but which scripture, which one, which law are we supposed to follow? And he's like, scrap it all.
Yeah.
I mean, he did and he didn't, right? But he said the fulfillment is love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, and mind, and love your neighbor as yourself.
Yeah.
So what is loving ourselves? I mean, we're so critical with ourselves. So then we're going to be critical for the world, right? Or if we're critical of others, then we're going to be critical of ourselves, and everything will have that critical eye, right? But if we are made in love and we are designed for it, and then we can look like the word namaste, or is the divine in me recognizes the divine in you. Therefore, I'm not going to treat you like crap. I'm going to treat you as you are designed, which is with awe and with love. So that brings me to my day-to-day, which is writing and sharing stories. I believe that as we share our stories and as we learn the stories of others, we heal. We heal ourselves, we heal one another. And it might not heal like the way I thought it was supposed to with Noah, right? But the reality is like Noah, his life and death was the amount of time it was supposed to be. And it's not what I wanted it.
Yeah.
He knew that. His soul had a understanding, and he did what he was supposed to do. And I'll never be the same because of it.
Yeah. The theme, and I know we talked about it even before we were recording and during coffee and dinners as well, but the theme of when we share our stories, we heal. It's just true. I mean, you've shared how you were accidentally blogging about your journey, and how that when it went out in the world, other people showed up to help you heal. And it would never have happened. And we don't know how much it healed them to read it as well. Like they were clearly touched and part of the journey in that sense. And I find it sad, really, that our brain, our critical part of our consciousness that criticizes ourselves or our conditioning or whatever is around us. I was just talking about it with a friend of mine just before the podcast, of why we tend to, the default is to isolate when we're struggling instead of sharing our story so that we can heal. And it's the opposite of what needs to happen. It's like, if you're struggling, don't isolate, because then how are you going to heal?
Right. Yeah. We weren't, there wasn't just one person designed on earth.
Yeah.
Like,
exactly.
Right. And there's been generations and generations and generations. We are designed for connection and for community. And it's not just for great parties with disco balls like I throw, but
those two.
Yes, those two. But it's for the raw and the real and the all up in each other's stuff. Not because, I mean, I know that's vulnerable. I know that was the thing, though, is that's where I knew I had to keep writing, because I was like, oh, I'm not the only one. And that was one of the big, Noah was in an ICU with 20 units. And he was just one of the kids. And the whole freaking unit was full, which sucks, right? And then we're in a hospital full of kids. Like it just, but I was like, we're not the only ones going through this. We're not the first parents to lose a child. We're not the last parents to lose a child. And I had this just deep knowing of every kid represents a family, and that family looks all sorts of ways, right? And then they're in a community, they're in a neighborhood, they're in a school, they're in a synagogue, they're in a church, they're in a mosque, they're in a temple, they're in some, larger community, then they're in a broader, and I just could see those ripple effects. And I was like, this isn't just about us. This transcends just our story. And it sucks because maybe that was my conditioning, because I was a pastor and I'm like always thinking about others. And I have pulled back at times, because I was very public. I wrote out my guts in real time from the hospital. And I realized part of me was trying to help heal others in the midst of that, which is that conditioning of being a minister. But I have given myself permission over the last 18 plus years to say, this is okay, that this is just for me. I'm allowed to be sad about this by myself. Or but then I've always had great friends people were not, they were afraid. They were absolutely afraid to step into our situation, but they did it anyway. Like
That's
you
wonderful.
said, like they entered into that connection and community.
Yeah.
Even though it was raw. Everybody we knew had kids at the same age. So like that is the biggest, exposure to your but they showed up. Our friends in our church at the time brought us meals for 5 months at the hospital.
Yeah.
And that was another revelation I had, is like, church isn't in a building. It's confined to a building.
Yeah.
That's not where actual deep community has to happen. Like, we're having it in this sterile hospital room, because it's where people show up. And
community is where people show up.
Exactly. Yeah.
So I really appreciate your reflections on it being about kind of awe and wonder too, because I think those are the things that get missed. I was not raised with any religion, but I've spent some time in churches actually fairly recently, just because we play some music for a relative of my partner's, and we which is great. But I enjoy listening to the sermons, and sometimes I feel like it wraps up almost too tight. It has like this. It has some cool idea and message, and it talks about community and wanting to help people and realizing you can see yourself in others and acknowledging your own flaws. And sometimes when it then wraps up in like, oh, this is kind of only confined to this building, or this just like wrapped up in what they're specifically prescribing as like God as a box, in that then it feels like, okay, well, I feel like we got so much of the magic that exists and so much of the wonder of the world and existence, and then it almost like it almost takes away from the enjoyment of that when you try and just wrap it and say, well, this is just for this group of people that happen to be here now, or just for, we'll put this in a label, and at some point it's too bad, because we all just are existing and there's so much to be in wonder of.
That is so good, Alex. I can't add anything to that. You are spot on. I love that is something you came away with from those experiences, because that has been my I'm a middle child peacemaker. So like, I grew up you're not allowed to say anything bad about anything, right? Or be critical or judgmental or anything. But I've given myself permission to, how do I really feel, Adrienne? Right. And the thing that was bothering me for the last couple decades in church was that, well, one, somebody's telling me stuff I already know from the Bible.
Because you've studied it over and
so,
over.
Great. Okay. So you're adding your story to it. And that's the part I love. However, you walk in, you're in rows, you're looking at the backs of people's heads. Somebody else is telling you these things. They wrap it up neatly, because that is what American church has become. You wrap it up neatly, and then everybody stands up, turns around, and walks out. And I was like, why are churches not set up in round tables?
Yeah.
I don't understand.
Where's the community?
Where's the community part, right? And also, why are we only allowing the one person to tell us the things when there's 8 billion people with all the different genetic expressions of God sitting, on this earth, and they're going to have a different perspective. They can bring, just like you were able to pull out things as I'm verbally processing my story, you were able to pull out points, right? AI is taking notes that are like stellar. Wow, here's a thread. Christiane did the same. but you don't get that when you're just being, it's like a college lecture, right? And that's
Mhm.
not
Yeah.
that's not what the church is supposed to be. But that's what it's become. And so all the power and the messaging and is all set up in a central location. And it is, I will stop because I mean, I'm writing a book actually. I've been writing it since Noah's in the hospital, but I'm actually releasing it. Noah's birthday was June 10th, 2006. And this June 10th, 2025, I am releasing a book. And I'm going to share, because there you get like 80 to 100,000 words, and
Yes.
we just 45 minutes on a podcast. So,
Yes.
but I definitely dive into that more because it's just a grief that I've held
Mhm.
of the church being hijacked by enterprise, and I do believe so. In my middle child heart of hearts, I truly believe that it's been with good intention, right? Like
Mhm.
I had this encounter with the divine, and so I'm going to tell you how it happened, and then this will happen for you. I mean, like, hence the high church, right? Orthodoxy, all the things, right? And then you get all these branches. Did you know there's 33,000 Christian denominations?
I
You
didn't
get
even know
all,
there was anything besides Catholicism until I came to the US.
yeah, right,
So
because you
people were
grew
saying,
up,
like, we're not Catholic, but we're Christian. I was like, what are you talking about? There is no
right?
other.
Yeah, and it's the same. I mean, when we
Yes.
went to Siberia one time, this
Yeah.
guy's like, I don't get you Americans. Like, we are just the Russian Orthodox Church, but you
Yeah.
guys are like all over the board. And it was the first time I ever heard of it. And
Yeah.
I thought we were better though, because we were at least non-denominational. But that's still just another denomination. We're just,
It's another box.
yeah. And I don't, like, people wonder, like, oh, Adrienne, are you astray? Do you even believe in God? Why are you so angry? I'm not angry. God and I are fine. We've been fine the whole time. I just don't, I think it's silly. And I know now that I'm silly to have ever tried to box it all in. And if we're to go back to just even the garden story of creation, like, I love reading scripture and then saying what's not in it. And it doesn't, it's like, God made all the things, said it was good, and then was like, you guys go check it out. I just made the stuff. Go have fun, go explore, go have fun, do your thing, right? And I think that's what we're meant to do. I think we're
Mhm.
still meant to do that. We haven't ever not been meant to do that, but we are seeking these containers in order to figure it out. And it's all been about just the playful curiosity of wonder the whole time.
Yeah. 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 Which, as you mentioned several times throughout this, but even before we started recording, the way to actually get to that curiosity of wonder is by pausing
Mm-hmm.
and
Yeah.
not and focusing on, yep, it's 100% true, we're all gonna die. That's 100% guarantee. How much do we want to live? And the living is through pausing, through paying attention, through realizing when we're on autopilot and when we're not,
Mm-hmm.
is to making conscious decisions about creating communities, being community, connecting, and all of those things that we just take for granted, or we assume somebody else is going to do, or we assume we don't need
Right. Yes.
I would
until it
also
Yes.
add
smacks
one
us in the
tiny
face.
caveat that it's also a conscious choice and entirely plausible and good to once in a while have a day where you spend it playing Scrabble on your phone.
Yes,
That's also a
absolutely.
1,000% existence life. That's not a waste of time. That's not a loss of time.
Yes.
That is time.
Yeah.
Right.
You're connecting with yourself and with what you need at that point.
Exactly. And let me tell you, my phone never beats me at Scrabble anymore.
There you
Good
go.
now.
There you go.
No, but you're right. I mean, that's the thing is, I was in a forced timeout, right? I
Mhm.
had, like, we lived at the hospital for and a half months. And I had to be intentional. So I was like, well, if I can't go out and because so one of my favorite things in the world is to talk to strangers, because then they're not strangers anymore. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And then you're making a human to human connection and people feel seen. And so I was like, dang it, if I'm going to be stuck in this hospital, anybody that walks in this bedroom or, this hospital room, I'm going to learn their story. I'm going to, ask them questions, get to know their hearts. And so it was funny because over the amount of time, Noah accrued 40, what are they? Not charge nurses, like his primary nurses, like the ones that wanted to always sign up for him. He had a little fan base, and they would go do their rounds on the other patients, and then they'd want to come and just hang out in his room. Well, it's not because he was, asking them questions. It was because they were feeling seen. I mean,
Yes.
I'm still in contact with several of his nurses, and they're incredible humans. But, they had to be there. I had to be there.
Mm-hmm.
So let's get to know each other's stories, Yeah. You guys, nurses are amazing. Let me just plug
Oh,
all them.
yes. 100%. I mean,
And I love the doctors. They were great. They were doing the best they
yes.
can. They
Yes.
never
The
figured it out.
nurses.
It's not their fault, but the
Yes.
nurses, let me just say,
Yes.
like,
Yeah.
they kind of run the whole
Yes.
job.
They do.
So,
Yeah.
yes.
And they don't get quite as much credit as they should, but yeah. Yeah, I learned that with 2 childbirths, that it's all about the nurses. And when, in nowhere close to a similar story about when William spent time at Children's Hospital. It was the same. It's the nurses.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's the nurses. And I love how you said that being there helped them feel seen. It was another way to seek community and to pause. They got to pause.
Right. And I mean, because they're surrounded by death. Like Noah wasn't the first child that died in the hospital, right? So they're surrounded by this heartache and this tough stuff every day, right? But to be able to, and I don't know, maybe I saw his room as something more than it was, but the fact that they kept coming there and hanging out a little bit longer and lingering and being so gracious, like to help me, like when I had a wish, like, hey, I want to just snuggle on the floor with Noah. Is that even possible with all of his tubes and all the things? And they're like, yep, let's just do it. Let's make it happen. I mean, you guys probably didn't think that this would be something where there's like scriptural references and we're talking about God on this, like, leadership development, human podcast. But there's a scripture that talks about entertaining strangers, because in doing so, you may have entertained an angel. And I mean,
that's beautiful.
I think nurses are those. And I mean, so many people, right? We don't know. The guy who checked me out at the grocery store, this cheetah story.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah. So true. Yeah. So how do we pause more? Because there is an element of being able to connect with others if we're connected with ourselves. Otherwise, it's just this running around. You're still running around. If you don't actually take the time to take a whole day and just play Scrabble in the closet.
Right. So, well, for me, pausing. So, you know how you think that you can't possibly make something happen because I'm too busy and I got too much going on. And then I was in this forced pause and the whole world actually kept rotating on its axis outside of the hospital walls without me. And I was like, what? Dang. I thought I was necessary, right?
Yeah.
And so I was doing that. I mean, I had to learn how to breathe. I was holding my breath for so many years. Right. So I started breathing. I mean, simple things like, the 5-7-8 method of inhale for 5, hold it for 7, exhale for 8, or the 4-4-4-4 box breathing. Um, and because I was a really good middle child, and so I stuffed all the things for so many years. So I had a total disconnect between my body and
Mm.
my, actual presence of mind. And um, I would, the way I do it now and the way I started in the hospital was one, breathing. And then I wrote the word intention,
Mm.
just set an intention and then show up for that. So like eye contact, right? If there's
Mm.
another person involved, put the
Yeah.
freaking phone down.
Yes.
What if we hand wrote notes? That would be so fun if we still did that and we
Oh
just fold
yeah,
them up
that would be
in cool
fun.
origami form and just like
Yes.
chuck it
Yeah.
across the room. But eye contact, I'm old school, I'm Gen Xer, so phone calls as far
Mm-hmm.
as being
Yes.
intentional towards others. Um, but for me, it's been a long journey of um, coming back to myself and to my body and to my heart and listening and pausing and saying, like, even putting my hands on my heart,
Mm-hmm.
right? Or on my belly and my heart, or on my eyes and my heart, and just asking myself, what do I need, or what
Yeah.
am I feeling?
Mm-hmm.
Is this true? Right? Is that thought true about me?
Mm-hmm.
I had plenty of thoughts that weren't um,
Yeah.
beneficial or life-giving to myself. And so it takes a lot of shifting, but it's
Yeah.
an intentional path,
Mm-hmm.
instead of just like mechanized the way you know, our culture can be, like just going through the motions.
Mm-hmm.
And being okay to say no, that I feel like is
Mm-hmm.
part of the pause,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
because every no is a yes to something, or every yes is a no to something else. And so like
Yeah.
what what matters? And I was a bit radical, like, it was a really tough life lesson. So I was like, well, nothing compares to my kid dying, so I'm just going to chuck everything and just do this. And it's like you have to have a balance. We have to live in the day to day, right? You
Yeah.
can't be completely extreme like that. But like in I don't answer my phone right around the school pickup time, because I want to be
Mm-hmm.
intentional with my son,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Brian, he's
Yeah.
14. The kid's telling me things right now. So
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
going to pay attention, because there'll be a day where he's like, I'm not going to tell my mom that.
Yeah.
So one present, or when my daughter calls, if I keep my phone on silent and vibrate. So
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
sometimes she has to call her dad to get me, but then when she calls him, how can I be present?
Yeah.
Or my husband, right? I mean, we can get in a pattern where
Mm-hmm.
you're
Yeah.
just like two ships in the night. And we had gotten into that a little bit before Noah
Mm-hmm.
was born, just
Yeah.
busyness of being young
Mm-hmm.
parents. So, okay, we need to, I know it sounds lame that we have to schedule it, but let's schedule dates.
Mm-hmm.
Let's not bring our phones on our dates.
Mm-hmm.
Let's make eye contact. Yeah.
Yeah. Those are great. Oh, great. It is. It takes effort for sure. To pause with so much stuff around. One of my favorite things is I started doing started getting acupuncture, and it's twice a week, once or twice a week. And I love the thing that I love the most is because you have needles all over you. You actually can't do anything else.
Yeah.
You can't even lift your hand. Like you
No.
are just stuck in this, close your eyes, sit
Mhm.
there for as long as the acupuncturist decides you're going to sit there and you don't do anything else.
Mhm.
There's no buzzing, there's no looking at the phone, there's no moving, there's not even scratching your chin if it starts itching. There's
Right.
nothing else.
Right. Yeah.
And I've found to actually really love that. I'm like, that is my one of my many. I meditate and it's the same thing and going on walks, but that is one of my sanctuaries now. I'm like, I get to do nothing except for being with me, my soul, my thoughts,
Mhm.
and that's it.
How long did it take you when you first started trying acupuncture to sit with those thoughts or let those come and go? Because it does
That's a good
take
question. Yes,
practice.
that's a good question. I mean, I've been getting acupuncture for over 20 years, not consistently. This is the most consistent. I've been doing it for over a month now. It's the most consistent, but uh, the sitting with the thoughts, I've actually learned through meditation. I've been doing transcendental meditation for 5 years, almost 6 years, every single day. And
Yes.
so it's something I'm very used to. And it's something I seek. So part of my healing journey is, besides reaching out to people, the minute I feel like I can't, that's when I actually do, because I know that's the moment I actually need to say, like, going into darkness, don't think I can pull myself out, needs something. Somebody's saying something. But the other thing that I do is I increase my meditation time. So instead of just doing 20 minutes a day, there are days that I'll do 2 hours, 3 hours, because that's where I sit with my thoughts and I process. And so that's where I guess I'm used to it. I seek it. I need that time.
Mm-hmm. That's good. Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not up to that many hours or even an hour, but I do love, like, I guess with the breathing, it's like meditative
Yeah.
breathing, right?
Yeah.
But I have a lot of thoughts, so very many
Oh,
of them.
yes.
And and it was hard for me at first, but then just that whole consciousness around the thought of, okay, that's a thought,
Yeah.
and it can now go, and
And
I'm
then you
gonna
just go. Yeah.
again, and it just bringing it back to that breath. And it's so funny because semantics wise, like, again, every major world religion talks about coming back to the breath, and then God being the breath of life, and
Yeah.
all, breathing life into us. But our culture, we're holding our breath, right? For whatever thing it is
Yeah.
that we're holding our breath for, right?
Yes.
I love that you have that practice.
Mhm.
I think what I've done too, before it was like, as a Christian raised in that world for a while, you're supposed to have like a quiet time,
Mhm.
the practice of like sitting with scripture, and I would write notes, whatever, pray, and then it was just kind of packaged, kind of like you were talking about earlier, Alex, about going into the sermon, and it's wrapped up neatly, and then here you go.
Mhm.
Um, and that just never felt right for me. I wasn't ever good at it. I'm a 4 on the Enneagram, if that's another show you've done, and I just don't really like to be boxed in or told what to do. And so I stopped saying amen, or
Mhm.
like
Mhm.
that was the end. And I
Mhm.
was like, come on, like we're doing this all day long,
Mhm.
you know,
Yeah.
and making it like a lifestyle instead of just like
Mm.
checked off my box of being spiritual today.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's on my to-do list. Just be
Yeah.
spiritual for 1 hour.
Yes. Did
Got
that.
done.
Now let's go load the dishwasher and fold the laundry.
Exactly. You know, I mean, that's not what's the point of that? That's dutiful. That's not life-giving.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's not filling.
Yeah, something just wonderful about intention and observation, intention and just being present
Mhm.
to the only thing we have, the present.
Mhm. Yeah. And I mean, honestly, that's another thing with grief. So uh before Noah, I didn't. I mean, even up until my folks passed away, in my opinion, prematurely. My mom was 68, my dad was 71. It's totally ridiculous, and I got gypped. But even up. Wait, I'm gonna pause. What were we talking about? Why did I bring this up?
Grief. You were talking
Intention and
about
observation.
Oh, yes,
intentional observation with grief.
yes. Okay. So being intentional with grief, because that whole people pleasing part of me, right? Our culture, you don't extend grief very long. You have the
Mhm.
service, and then the burial, and then
Mhm.
it's like, okay, And when my folks passed away in 2014, 2017, I was intentional because of Noah to show up in their final months and, be present in it. So I had with Noah, I also had it. It's like that premature grief or the preemptive grief that you experience because you know that the person isn't going to live, but then actually practicing the presence of grief, of showing up with it. And I realized there's a lot that I had tried to still stuff. I mean, in my body. I've had chronic pain. I go to acupuncture. My brother-in-law is an acupuncturist.
Oh,
So that's super convenient, right?
yes.
So for that. But showing up for grief and feeling the feelings and crying the tears, being pissed and being numb and whatever the feelings are, like they're ridiculous. And I have a friend, I have several bereaved parent friends who we kind of have some sick jokes because we're in this club we never meant to be a part of, but it's there are no rules for grief other than like be in it. Right? Because I tried to avoid it. I tried to avoid it after my mom died. I told my husband, we're selling the house and I'm running away and you're all coming with me. And so we moved to Nashville for 4 years. And that's another story because in Nashville, I was in bed for quite a long time because I was sad because I was trying to avoid the grief of my mom. Right. And actually, that was one thing I wanted to bring up today because I had heard somewhere that I started meditating there and feeling all the feelings in Nashville. But I had heard somewhere that in order to get kind of out of our depression and our not to get over grief, right, but to get through depression and to get up and out of that, like we need to focus on somebody else other than ourselves, right? So I had this idea that I was going to go and volunteer and that I had something to actually offer. And I found I had heard about this organization. It was started by Rebecca Stevens. She's awesome, Becca. She's an Episcopalian priest, and she started Thistle Farms, and their whole tagline is "Love Heals." And it is a 2-year residential program for women post-incarceration, post-addiction, or post-trafficking. And they provide everything. They provide financial support. They do record expungement. They have free healthcare and trauma recovery and residential. Like you live there for 2 years and you are employed and you get your first paycheck within 3 weeks because these women haven't had a paycheck for all different reasons, right? It was given to them by a pimp or whatever. Everything was all controlled. It was all control based. And Becca started this program that's not control based. It's not like it's all about their freedom and that love and unconditional love, not prescriptive love, not like if you do it this way, then you'll be. And I got to witness this. I went there thinking I was going to be a volunteer, and they healed me from that grief of losing my parents in such a short amount of time. They provided community simply because they believe in the power of love healing. And I showed up in that grief. I felt the feelings. I'm not saying I'm done. I still think about my parents and I'm like, I can cry, drop of the hat, but I have experienced what it looks like to heal in community because I watched it in action in such an extravagant thing. Extravagant expression of like lavish, unconditional love. So that's Thistle Farms. It's based out of Nashville, Tennessee. And I still, I virtually volunteer with them and then we support them. But I love them. They're an amazing organization of like doing like practically, right? Practically healing and what that looks like.
Yeah. That's beautiful.
Mm.
Yeah. It's wonderful to know that, yes, those exists,
Mhm.
and they are very much necessary. Probably a lot more of them.
Yeah, they're just holding space. I think that's the thing
Yes.
too, is we
Holding
need to
space.
hold space for ourselves and hold space for
Yes.
others. That's where you're
Yes.
going to find that
Yeah.
healing. And I have to commend you guys. I think the way you, excuse me, the way you hold space for people in the workplace to remember their humanity and then hold the space for the humanity of their colleagues. Like, I think it is, it's so counter, right? The
Oh,
establishment
yes.
of like the workplace. So we don't talk about personal things. Yeah, you need to, because these are persons, these are humans coming to work. And you guys have tapped into that. And I think it's stunning. I think it's beautiful, the work that you guys are doing with
It's very
in
much a rebellion of the establishment.
yes. Yes.
The true and true rebellion.
Yes. Keep it up. I love that.
Yes. It's the forced pause. It's like,
Mhm.
Yes.
you don't get to pause anywhere else. You're gonna get to pause with us. Because
Right.
that's why we're here, for you to pause for 30 minutes or an hour
Right.
or an hour and a
Yeah.
half when the hour goes long.
Mhm. Right. And their places of work are paying for the pause. So like,
Yes.
go for it, man. Go for it.
Yes.
Get into that pause, because
Mhm.
I love just some of the things you guys have shared about people sharing the
Oh, yeah.
impact
Yeah.
of what those pauses have done for them personally, and then obviously in their teams.
Yeah.
There's going to be the ripple effects, right?
Yeah. Yeah, we just had a couple of moments of pause this week, and one of them reached out afterwards because he said like, wow, like in that hour I went from being super frustrated and venting about my frustrations to reflecting on what those actually meant to coming up with a plan, and now I'm taking actions. And then 24 hours later he emailed saying like, I've already taken action. But it's that pause
Mhm.
that was necessary.
Love
Because
it.
we didn't do anything. We just
Right.
created space and asked questions.
Well, you did. You create a space.
We created
That is a huge anything. That's the first
yes.
drop of the ripple effects. And
Yeah.
then
Yeah.
the ripple effects are just like
Yeah.
the wow, right? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you guys do transformative work. And probably, like organizations probably hire you guys thinking this is very business-like. We're going to bring in these, and then they're like, wow.
Hopefully.
Intentional or not, it ends up helping with the business too. There's that, and that's not the
Yes.
goal. The goal is just to help the people, but then it turns out that helps the business, and
Yes.
we just have to back our way into that sometimes so that people let us help them.
Yes. Yeah, for sure. But, yeah. So there's 1.5 billion other topics we could go into, or tangents and rabbit holes. For now, what is your definition of authenticity?
My definition of authenticity is being able to be raw and candid with yourself and others, and being at peace with that, no matter if it's the shiny, right, like,
Yeah.
and presentable, or it's just like in your very worst place, you're still, you're still loved and sought after.
That's beautiful. I love the addition of not the addition, but the inclusion of with yourself, because we can run marathons at Usain Bolt's speed from ourselves.
Mhm. Yeah. I used to be a kid at war with myself. Growing up in the 80s and the diet culture and all that. And I would look in the mirror and never have anything nice to say. And then at some point, thanks to Noah, I saw a picture of myself when I was like 3, and I was so freaking cute. Like ringlets, like really cute little rotund belly, knock knees, just softer, plumper, cute little kid. And I had this thought come to my head. How would I talk to her?
Mm.
So I put that picture on my mirror and I started talking to her because she's still part of me.
Yeah.
And started loving her.
Mhm.
And that was also part of the healing journey, right? How we talk to ourselves.
Definitely much is. It's a big part of therapy
Mhm.
is to go back to talking to that version of ourselves. Yeah.
Yeah.
So you've got a book coming up and you already
Yes.
have one out there and you've got a
Yes.
blog and you're healing through stories. So where can people find you?
I am on Instagram. I do write there sometimes, and on my so just Adrienne L. Graves, and Alex can put those in the show notes, right? And then on Facebook I have Adrienne Graves Writes, and I'm writing there. I have not been as faithful to my blog as I was in years past, or my website, but I'm updating that. And I don't know the title of my book right now because I have an entire Word document of ideas that range from anywhere from "God, you're fired" to "You're not the boss of me" to "good," just the word "good," to "two things can be true at once." That's kind of what I'm leaning at and leaning towards.
Love that one.
But I will let you know, of
Yes,
course,
please
final
do.
title is, so that you can let your audience know as well.
Please do.
Thank you. Thank you for letting me plug that. And that'll be coming out June 10th. That is my goal for it would be his 19th birthday.
We'll line up to buy it.
Absolutely.
Thank you. You're sweet.
Well, thank you, Adrienne.
Thank you
much,
so
Adrienne.
much for having me. It was a pleasure, and I had no idea, like you guys said, I didn't know what direction that would go. So I hope that it's encouraging to some of your listeners. And
I'm inspired, so that really it's all that matters.
Yeah. It's all just within the Zoom room.
Yes. Thank you so much, and thanks for listening.
Thank you, Adrienne.